If you're coming from part 2, you know that we've calculated Nicole is able to move at almost 1/3 the speed of sound, heat up air, although it may be key energy as some of you have pointed out, and she can destroy items with 495 million newtons of force. It's definitely safe to say Nicole isn't some average citizen of Elmore. However, after reading through many of the comments posted on the last video, I saw that I just barely scratched the surface of Nicole's strength. In one particular scene, Nicole activates her extreme power after her house gets trashed, creating a sonic boom with her fingers and making her eyes turn purple. She also made Tobias' father see souls, giving him a grim reminder what would happen if he didn't listen. Just to create a sonic boom with her snap, Nicole's fingers would have to move at a minimum of faster than the speed of sound, which is around 334 meters per second. A standard finger is also around 16.9 millimeters in width, and if we double this, since she travels 2 finger lengths, we get 33.8 millimeters, or 0.0338 meters. Dividing the distance by the speed, we can get the time. So 0.0338 meters divided by 343 meters per second would give us just 0.000099 seconds, which is how much time it took Nicole to generate a sonic boom with only her fingers. Furthermore, we see Nicole's eyes are shining a bright purple that seems to be getting brighter. The wavelength of this color is around 460 nanometers, and through the equation E equals hc times lambda, lambda being the wavelength, h being Planck's constant, and c being the speed of light, the energy a single photon of this color light would have can be found. Multiplying out the values h and c are 6.626 times 10 raised to the minus 34 joules times seconds, and 3 times 10 raised to the 8th meters per second, and dividing by the wavelength of this purple, which is around 460 times 10 raised to the 9th nanometers, we get that a photon of this colored purple light has around 4.3 times 10 raised to the minus 19 joules of energy. Assuming Nicole's eyes are full of photons and that they're spheres, the volume of a single eye would have to be 7.24 times 10 raised to the minus 6th meters cubed. The length of a photon is around 1 Planck unit, or 1.6 times 10 raised to the minus 35 meters, and since a photon is shaped like a cylinder, the equation V equals 2 pi radius times height can be used. The radius of a photon can be calculated using many different equations. First off, finding the radius of an electron using the equation Re equals E squared divided by 4 pi epsilon naught mass naught speed of light squared, which is 2.81 times 10 raised to the minus 15th meters, and then using the equation with the wavelength, we can calculate the radius of the photon using the equation rho naught equals 2 times square root 2 Re lambda divided by square root 2 minus 1 pi. We have around 7.8 times 10 raised to the minus 11 meters, using the value calculated for Re and the wavelength of 460 nanometers for the light purple light. Finally, finding the volume of this photon, we get around 7.9 times 10 raised to the minus 45 meters cubed. Finally, taking the volume of the eye and dividing it by the photon's volume, we can get how many photons are in a single eye of Nicole's, which is around 9.164 times 10 raised to 38 photons in a single eye. And multiplying by the energy each photon has, we can find how much energy is in a single eye of Nicole's, which comes out to be around 3.94 times 10 raised to the 20th joules. And multiplying by 2 to find the energy in both eyes comes out to be around 7.88 times 10 raised to the 20th joules of energy in both eyes, or 788 quintillion joules of energy in both eyes. Seeing this number, it's no wonder Tobias' dad turned into a baby. It also isn't a surprise how Nicole just looking at people shows them the soul she took. Now, if that wasn't already a surprise to you, Nicole is also able to light her eyes on fire and burn a marshmallow at a certain distance. In this episode, after the car breaks down and the overpowered Richard Watterson is lounging around, Nicole threatens him through her eyes. But not through giving him a death stare, but a literal fire stare. It took Nicole around 0.06 seconds to burn the marshmallow and light it on fire, assuming she was around 0.2995 meters away from the marshmallow, and we found this through referencing the radius of the tire of their car and matching it up with the distance. The surface area of the marshmallow is around 0.004 meters squared. With all these variables, we can combine them into the equation for thermal conductivity through convection through the air. The equation for this thermodynamic phenomenon being Q divided by T equivalent to K times A times TA minus TB, with Q being the joules of heat, T being the time, K being the thermal conductivity constant, A being the surface area, and capital T being the temperature before and after the heat transfer. We can find the heat energy of the marshmallow through the equation Q equals mc delta T, m being the mass, c being the specific heat capacity, and delta T being the change in temperature. The mass of the marshmallow is around 0.005 kilograms, and it goes from 300 to 366 degrees Kelvin. And the specific heat of a marshmallow is around 1.43 joules per gram Kelvin, giving us a value of around 471.9 joules of energy once we multiply out all the values. Combining all the values into the previous equation, the value of Nicole's eye temperature can be found as well. Rearranging the equation to solve for Nicole's eye temperature, you get Q divided by T times K times A plus T sub B, with T sub B being the temperature of the marshmallow in Kelvin. The joules Nicole loses to heat up the marshmallow is around 471.9 joules, dividing by the denominator, which is the time it takes, around 0.06 seconds, the thermal conductivity of air at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 0.02625 watts per meter times Kelvin, and finally the surface area of the marshmallow, which is around 0.0038 meters squared. We get a numerical value of 78,847,118 degrees Kelvin. And then adding on the temperature of the marshmallow when it is burning, which is around 200 Fahrenheit or 366 degrees Kelvin, we get a final value for the temperature Nicole's eyes are at to be a much greater 780,847,484 degrees Kelvin. For people who don't understand how hot that is, it's around 140,925,011.53 degrees Fahrenheit. And for those of you who don't measure distances using football fields, it's about 780,847,484 degrees Celsius. Just for reference, the temperature of the core of the sun is a measly 25 million Kelvin. We can actually also calculate the heat energy Nicole's eyes have through using the equation Q equals mc delta T again. The heat capacity of the eye is around 4,000. The temperature her eyes before she burned them were at around 38 Celsius and goes to 78,847,484 degrees Celsius. The mass of the eye is around 0.0075 kilograms. Multiplying these values out again, we see Nicole applied around 749,990,670 joules in only 0.06 seconds. If Nicole's ability to apply a tremendous amount of heat energy wasn't enough to impress you, she can also travel faster than the speed of sound for a sustained period of time, as pointed out by the last video's comments. Using the work energy theorem, which explains the change in kinetic energy equating to the work Nicole does, her initial kinetic energy was 0, then goes to at least as fast as the speed of sound. Since she is able to travel faster than the speed of sound, so at a minimum traveling at around 343 meters per second, the formula for kinetic energy is K equals 1/2 mass times speed squared. The mass that is moving is Nicole and the mass of her 3 children, so Nicole plus Darwin plus Gumball plus Anais, which comes out to be around 309.7 kilograms total. After adding up all the children and Nicole's weight, multiplying the values out and dividing by 2, we get that Nicole uses around 18,217,947 joules of energy. And if we find out how long she's sustaining this, which comes out to be around 10 seconds, we get 1,821,794 watts of power, since power equals work divided by time, which is equivalent to around 2,443 mechanical horsepower. Now, aside from all the physics of Nicole and how strong she is in her mechanical sense, the biological power and abilities of Nicole are also extraordinarily scary. She was able to manipulate her own and the DNA of others just through looking at them, which I can't even begin to calculate how it would be possible. But I have some theories. There are many ways to manipulate the genes of a certain person, but the general idea is all the same, which is that the parts of the gene made up of DNA, which are made up of parts called nucleotides, which in turn also have 3 parts, those parts being the phosphate group, a nitrogenous base, and a sugar. What Nicole is doing when she manipulates the genes of others is changing their nitrogenous base, and to do this, she can either use ionizing radiation and mutate the genes in a controlled way, or in the case of aging, there's a completely different way she does this. Aging occurs usually when the telomeres shorten, the caps at the end of a chromosome. This can be caused naturally when the cells divide, or it can be accelerated through lack of sleep and stress. When Nicole looks into the eyes of the security guard, she inserts a huge amount of stress into him, causing him to age instantly. This stress came from seeing the world inside Nicole's eyes, the world of pain and suffering, thus shortening the man's telomeres instantly. To manipulate her own body and structure, the genetic code of Nicole has to change itself. Just her being conscious of her cells and being able to use her own stem cells to turn into a crazy monster and warp her own body is beyond. The abilities of Nicole are just the tip of the iceberg for what I could find. Her insane strength and speed, coupled with her ability to manipulate her own and others' biological features, makes her likely one of the strongest characters to ever reach the screen.